Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks. And today is a fantastic day to be here. Also, hi. I'm beyond grateful for being able to talk to so many incredible authors. But today, I cannot even begin to tell you how excited I am to be sitting down virtually with one of my hands down all-time favorite storytellers. I'm bursting with excitement right now because I have the honor I'm sure. Sorry. I have the honor of interviewing the award-winning and New York Times best-selling author and storytelling legend, whose books always entertain, inspire, educate, and touch readers' hearts. My personal writing hero, Gordon Korman. I have all his books right here, and I'm super excited to talk with him and all that. We also there's this website called Protable. Gordon Korman's so cool and awesome that the website has its own question dedicated to his books. And you know that I beat my friends on that question because I knew it immediately. And yeah, I'm just so happy to be able to talk to Gordon. It's an honor.
E-Train, it's an honor right back. I've been following you on social media for a while, and I'm excited. Plus, I know you interviewed James Ponti already, and I'm definitely not falling behind James Ponti. So this should just kind of even us up.
Yeah. You're certainly at his level, if not more. Don't tell him I said that. You've written over 100 books. 101 is coming out pretty soon, the Super Teacher Project.
Yes.
And you've done it all. Your books have sold over 35 million copies. That's a lot for those who don't know math. And his most recent story, The Fort, was his 100th book. And like nearly all of his stories, it tackled important issues like domestic abuse, family, and friendship. And just to name a few, here are all the books that I've read by Gordon. The Mastermind series, very good and unique. The Slacker books, Super Gifted, Unplugged, Linked, War Stories, The Fort, Notorious, and This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall. And that's just a few of them. Gordon is an inspiration, and now let's jump into the first question. Your journey into writing for middle grade is one of the most interesting and inspiring stories I've heard. And I don't want to give too much away of your story, but in short, I read in the wonderful anthology Hope Wins that you wrote your first middle grade story. I'm talking with my hands a lot. You wrote your first middle grade story, This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall, when you were in 7th grade, and it was for a school project with a substitute teacher who happened to be your PE teacher. Okay, everyone's intrigued now. Will you tell us about your quest into publishing your very first book?
Yeah, well, I mean, he wasn't even a substitute teacher. It was just because I don't know. I don't know what it's like at your school, but I find like middle school schedules are just way too complicated. And for whatever reason, the way it shook out, the only available adult to cover our class in that hour was this guy, this coach. So nice guy, really good teacher. But at that time, it was his first year teaching, and he'd never taught English in his life. So when it came to creative writing, he just really didn't know what to tell us to do. And what he said was the equivalent of work on whatever you want for the rest of the year. We're going to write a novel. We're going to, write a chapter a week and an outline the first week. But it was basically just, keep on, fill the rest of the year creative writing wise with this one project, right? So, at first I started working on it in class because what choice did I have, right? That's what we're doing. I got into it. My story kind of, took off, started bringing it home, working on it at night. And the result was This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall. So check this out. You know what grade I got on my first book? B plus. So they gave me A plus on the actual story of it, but they deducted 1 grade for messiness. And that was kind of not that unusual because I was in middle school in the 1970s. And back then, like, you couldn't write on a Chromebook or an iPad. I mean, I wrote the whole thing in cursive.
Whoa. That whole thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I one of those old school composition books, like the marble notebook. But so At the time, I was the class monitor for Scholastic book orders, right? Like back in the day, they used to let a kid run Scholastic. So if you think about it, I had their address, right? Because it's printed
Mhm.
on the Scholastic book order forms. I just mailed my project to the address on the book order sheets. You're kind of looking at me like, that works. I got lucky. The guy at Scholastic who opened up my packet found the project. Now, I didn't send in, like the composition book full of scribbles. Truth, I got my mom to type it for me. So to this day, I have absolutely no idea if I ever would have become a writer if she had said no, right? But nice mom, she didn't. And that's what the guy at Scholastic read. He liked it, kicked it over to his boss. She liked it. And a few days after my 13th birthday, so at that point I was an eighth grader, I signed a contract for that first book.
Wow. That is a very interesting story about a story. And
Yeah,
that,
no, it was, and the thing about it too is I mean, it's just a lot of things kind of were lucky, right? I mean, like a lot of sort of fluky, I'm not saying it wasn't a good book or I didn't do a good job, but it also required a lot of being in the right place at the right time and things just kind of falling into place.
well, I know that Scholastic wasn't a very big publisher at the time. Would kids with ideas in the back of their minds or composition books full of words, would that be able to work if they're in the right place at the right time right now?
It would probably be harder, right? Just because everything gets harder
Yeah.
as so it's really hard to find a publisher without an agent these days, and which is not to say that it doesn't happen, but a lot of kids who become writers tend to follow different routes now. Like they post stuff on Wattpad. They tend to go the online route,
Yeah.
and once you're online, I mean, like there's always the chance that someone's going to be like, I was like leafing through a bunch of fanfic and I found this thing this guy wrote, and that applies to adults too, right? Any beginning writer, it's just really hard to get your foot in the door, and you require that little bit of luck.
Well, I'm super glad that your luck went through the roof because without this can't be happening at McDonald Hall, we might not have all 100 of your books to read. And fun fact, I was introduced to your world of entertaining reads a few years ago because my mom, during COVID, was like scouring the interwebs, searching for books I might like to read, and she spotted Slacker. And she was like, you should read this, Ethan, because you won't get off your butt and stop playing video games or reading. So she discovered it by accident, and I really liked the story. I could really relate to the characters, and a lot of kids can as well. Awesome storyline, super cool, and it was an accident how I stumbled upon the book, and the main character had a bit of a mistake, accident, good thing on in his story as well. So, will you share your motivation for writing a story where the protagonist was kind of, sort of addicted to video games, and have you been around middle schoolers who are hooked on video games, or do you play yourself?
I'm not a game. I kind of my age would have been like the very early video games.
Ah,
Like Space Invaders and
that's a
you know
great game, though. Galaga,
Pac-Man and
Space
stuff
Invaders.
like that, right? But my son was actually the inspiration for Cameron Boxer,
Oh,
right? Not that he's a slacker, but more like kind of like a video game addicted couch potato slacker. So whenever I wrote about Cameron Boxer and his gamer friends, I always kind of pictured, Jay Corman with his Xbox Live headset, kind of raging into the microphone, and you grew up with it, but for me, it's kind of mind blowing that
yeah.
you could be playing with your best friend who lives like 6 doors down, but you could also be playing with some 48-year-old guy in Helsinki and it's 3 in the morning there because this network goes absolutely everywhere. But I would say the main inspiration for Slacker was just listening to my son and his gamer friends talk about some of the stuff that they did and some of the experiences they had gaming, and it sort of sunk in that it's kind of, it's not just a hobby, it's sort of a lifestyle, right? Like, and that's a word that Cameron Boxer uses all the time, right? That this is my lifestyle. Like he wants it to be taken seriously, and certainly he takes it extremely seriously. And that was sort of where that whole Slacker thing kind of began. That and there was this one afternoon where my son was playing a game, and there's a gigantic battle going on the screen, and he's just like losing his mind. And my wife turns to me and says, when this kid's gaming, I bet the whole house could burn down and he wouldn't even notice. And obviously, she was kidding. If you're a gamer, it's kind of a classic mom
Yeah.
comment. But I kind of took it seriously. Like, is there a way that this could happen, or at least almost happen in real life?
And many of your stories feature misfit protagonists, characters that are different from everyone else, but also really lovable, like the protagonists in Super Gifted, The Unteachables, and a lot more. What drives you to write stories with such strong yet pretty different protagonists?
Uh, I mean, like, I think that a lot of what I write is about kind of being a misfit, right? Or,
Yeah.
or being on the outside looking in, and I mean, even if you go back to like the Swindle books, right? I mean, who the kids on the Swindle team are basically kind of the misfits of their school, but there are these things that they are just absolutely awesome at, and no one else kind of comes close to them, and that's um that, I guess. Well, I mean, I guess I was kind of a misfit too. I mean, I don't think, mean to portray my childhood as, I was horribly excluded from everything, but I was not your average kid. And underscore that with the fact that I love humor. Most of my books are funny, not all, but when I was 2 years old, the cartoons on TV that were my favorites, and we're talking, what's a 2-year-old going to watch, were the things that made me laugh. So I kind of felt that those characters, that kind of, like Cameron Boxer or Noah Euclid from Ungifted and Super Gifted, or I mean, dozens of my books gave me an opportunity to, on one hand, create extremely funny situations that I love, right? But also bring up some really serious issues of being excluded and being on the outside looking in and being considered sort of a misfit. That's really what my books have been about all this time.
And I also want to ask about the Super Teacher Project. I just discovered, actually, that you recently shared the cover reveal of your 101st book. Wow, 101 books, that's a lot. And I just cannot wait to read your newest middle grade book. And I bet everyone watching and listening would love to hear a little bit more about the Super Teacher Project. So without giving away any spoilers, what can you share?
Okay. Well, the Super Teacher Project, book 101, is coming out in January, and it's about Mr. Adact, who is a new teacher who arrives at a middle school, and he's kind of too perfect in a way, right? Like, he is, you cannot stump him with any kind of trivia. He knows every song lyric ever recorded. If a bee gets in the class and everyone's diving under their desks, like, he can literally snatch it out of the air, like, with 2 fingers. There is something up with Mr. Adact, and well, I guess this could be considered a bit of a spoiler, but what it is ultimately revealed to be is he is not human. He is a robot, but he's
Oh,
not a robot like I am a
yeah.
robot kind of, and I guess the thought that brought me to the story was just that AI is being developed to such a crazy crazy realistic level, and advances in robotics and cybernetics are so great now. Could you create a teacher who is an actual robot, guided by artificial intelligence, and no one could really tell? And then also, what kind of a teacher would that teacher be? Because if you think about it, um, AI learning tends to learn from what it's exposed to. And a middle school teacher is hanging out with a bunch of 11, 12, 13, and 14-year olds, right? So is that AI doomed to basically become the world's most technologically advanced middle schooler? So it was a really cool story because on the one hand, it's got this great footing in the kind of middle school kind of student teacher stories that I love, but it's also got some kind of larger themes, like what does it mean to be really human?
You seem to never run out of inspiration. You, all these different and unique new story ideas that have never been, well, they might have been, but never done to perfection like you. I Well, perfection because the teacher's perfect, and I bet it's gonna be a perfect book as well. That's a really interesting concept, and yeah, that's gonna be a great book.
Well,
It's def
I always knew that I wanted to take it seriously, right? Like, the idea of my teacher as a robot could easily be, like a very, I mean, very broad, silly,
yeah.
not, concept. But I always knew that I wanted to take it, but make it as realistic and believable and serious as it could possibly be. Lately I find that the best humor comes from trying not to be funny, right? Like
Definitely.
I actually focus on the serious as much as I can and let the humor kind of come out naturally, and it's been really working lately.
Yeah, I tend to do the opposite. I try to be funny, but it comes out like crickets. So,
Well, definitely when I was younger, like I was all in to try and make every line absolutely hilarious, and I have to admit, I mean, when I wrote my first book, I was 12. So if you read This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall, it's written by an author who is far closer to the age of the readership than I am right now, right?
yeah.
So you can choose my old books or my newer books depending on which one you like better. That's a personal choice. But in terms of like cred, I mean, I think that I probably had much better kid cred in my earlier books than I do now.
Yeah. And I'm really curious to know. I have one question that I have been dying to know about ever since I discovered through research and scouring the internet. So, I recently watched Swindle, which was a Nickelodeon adaptation of your book Swindle, and I also saw that you have quite a few TV shows or series and movies dedicated and based off of your books. Like you have This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall, those books, they have show adaptations. Well, how does it really work? Like, you do you have a huge say in the shows, or are you kind of in the background?
I'm definitely in the background. So the movie company is definitely in the driver's seat, right? That's why kids are always like, "Oh, why don't you make a Restart movie, or why don't you make a Masterminds movie?" And it's like, I want to,
Yeah.
it's not up to me. It's up to the movie company. And it's different, right? Like, the McDonald Hall, like the early Bruno and Boots books, which are now on Tubi TV for streaming. Those movies were made by uh, literally ex fans, like people who knew my books, when they were kids and kind of grew up loving them. And when they became movie makers, writers, directors, producers, camera people, they said, like, what are the books that really made me love stories? And they went back and they found these. So I won't say that they're exactly like the books, but the spirit of those movies is incredibly true to the spirit of those old books. Now, Nickelodeon Swindle, on the other hand, I mean, those guys were just so good at what they do. It was sort of the golden age of the Nickelodeon shows like iCarly and Victorious and, all that kind of stuff. And so they put together a team of writers of those kinds of those kinds of TV shows, actors from those kinds of TV shows, and directors who worked on those kinds of TV shows. So I mean, they just did a beautiful job with Swindle. Pretty different from what I wrote, but at the same time, really an excellent finished product. My favorite sort of fun fact about it was the fact that the star of Nickelodeon Swindle is Ariana Grande. I was like, seriously? We kind of caught her right before she got famous. I mean, she was famous on Nickelodeon, but she wasn't this kind of international, pop star that she is today. So what I try to do is, because I'm not in the movie business, is, I help when I can, I help when they want me to, but otherwise I stay out of the way. There are so many reasons why movies and TV shows don't get made. I don't want one of those to be, this annoying author just kept asking everybody extra questions and inserting himself into the process, and it messed everybody up. So I'm supportive. I'm a great cheerleader for it, but I'm not super involved.
I'm curious. I have a question about the Mastermind books. I
Mm-hmm.
thought I had all of them here. I guess I didn't, but I read all of them. So your Mastermind books are some of my favorite of all time. They're so thrilling. The story idea, the storyline was so unique. I would have thought that I'd read something like it before, but I never really had a perfect world all in their New Mexico. Okay, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a pretty good read. So what was the inspiration? Because I never really read, there might have been some shows about them that I just hadn't seen, but what was your inspiration for that kind of brand new, pretty entertaining, also interesting idea?
Well, I won't say personal experience, right? This
Yeah.
is definitely not from my life. But I guess what I was really, really interested in was what makes us the kind of people we are, right? Like, is your personality kind of hardwired into you? You're stuck with it. It's your nature, or is it nurture? Is it sort of, shaped by, I don't know, stuff like the people you
Yeah.
meet and the things that happen to you and experiences. And you know how they're always on TV saying like, "Oh, scientists in California are performing a study," blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I was like, they should really do a study on this. So just for giggles, I was like, how would you do a study on that? And I started thinking about what you'd have to do. And it's like, okay, you have to really control the environment. So you need this like tiny, isolated town so that people wouldn't be exposed to too much and you could really control it. And the more I thought about it, the more it started sounding like this really twisted experiment, right? And that's where I got the idea for Project Osiris, right? Which is, in masterminds, the kids discover their entire, their perfect lives are a total lie, and that they have been in this experiment since the day they were born. Incidentally, I know you do some writing. Like, think about this as like a hard thing to write. Is how do you tell a story from the perspective of clueless people, right? Because
Yeah.
don't know anything about being part of an experiment. So how do you reveal information to the readers when the narrators themselves don't even really know it? It was really hard to write, particularly that first Masterminds book. But what a thrilling series to be a part of once it was all over.
It was. What an ending. And also, what's really cool is having the narrators be like they're clueless, having clueless narrators when they discover it's kind of like you don't have a third person narrator like they live in an experiment. You're first person. The reader is learning along with the protagonists, and that's
Right.
always a concept that I enjoy, and a lot of other people do as well because the Mastermind series popular and super well deserving to be popular as well.
Thank you.
And now the next book I want to talk about, we have a lot of them, so I wanted to talk about them in a time span of an interview. But I still wanted to ask a couple questions about them because it was so hard to choose what book to talk about today. But I knew I had to talk about Linked. Linked shines a light on topics like anti-Semitism, hate, and it's just wow. I was speechless after reading your book in one sitting. And it's a story that hit home for me and many others because the story features Jewish protagonists. There's swastikas found on the walls. It's just I why was there not a story like this before in the middle grade genre? And it happened to be named one of Amazon's best books of 2022. It was a Sydney Taylor Honor Book, an NJBA winner. You know it's pretty big when it's an acronym. And it's a Sybil Award winner. And that's all really deserving. And why do you really decide to write about such serious and important social issues? And did any real life events motivate or influence Linked at all?
Well, I mean, I guess the main inspiration was the paperclip
Yeah.
school, right, in Tennessee. Um, Basically, a real school, Whitwell Middle School, Whitwell, Tennessee. They were doing a Holocaust unit, and they got really hung up on the number 6 million, and their take on it was, in my opinion, still like this is genius in a way,
Yeah.
right? Like that we all know what 6 million is. We all know that 6 million is a lot, but we've never actually seen what 6 million of something looks like. So, best way to study the Holocaust, to do justice to it, is to collect 6 million of something and really appreciate how huge the number is, and also how enormous an event the Holocaust was. And they chose paper clips. And what they discovered was, even with something like paper clips, where you can go to a store and buy a box of 100, 100 at a time, it's still really, really hard to get to 6 million paper clips. And they probably never would have made it, except they got famous, and people started hearing about their project and sending them boxes and bags and envelopes loaded with paper clips. And it went so viral that they actually ended up with over 30 million paper clips.
Wow.
One thing that I never figured out in my research was, like, what do you do with 24 million extra paper clips that you weren't trying to collect to begin with? But that was really the inspiration for Choke Cherry Middle School and the paper chain, right? The paper chain
Yeah.
being, no offense to paper clips, but you could buy a box of 100 paper clips. Have you ever worked on a paper chain? Like, it is
It's
one link at a time, the cutting, the
yeah.
looping, the gluing. And I figured this out, like a 6 million link paper chain, if you stretched it out, would be over 300 miles long. In other words,
Whoa.
they're not going to make it, except just like those kids in Tennessee, they get famous. So on the one hand, it gives me a chance to tackle, I mean, incredibly serious and topical era issues, right? I mean, we see things like that in the news almost every day, but at the same time, you can be pretty playful with it on one side. So I think that it's not the kind of thing most of my books are about, but it was just a fantastic story. I think for the writing style that I have and the kind of characters and plotting that I usually bring to a book.
It really did fit your writing style in all the books that I've read of yours. And it's a good question. What would you do with 24 million extra paper clips? Gotta think about that. I'll get back to
I,
you.
I believe I believe I do know the answer. So
Oh,
they did use 11 million, right? Because the 6 million were
oh
were
yeah.
the Jewish victims, and the 5 million were the non-Jewish victims of the Holocaust. So when their paperclip project ultimately became a tolerance and Holocaust memorial, I believe they used 11 million paperclips.
Wow. But I mean, that's still, you have 19 million left over. What
Yeah.
would you like you keep all of them and use them and like you have infinite paper clips basically for school. Like for the next 100 or 200 or 300 years, you have paper clips for days.
Well, I have to confess that I've never been there, so for all I know, outside of town, there's just a giant mound of paper clips.
I just gotta say, you're an absolute legend, and I'm so inspired by how your journey into books began, and how you've really never stopped writing from 12 years old to you're a year older than my dad, so because I know your birthday, you have it on your website. Okay, yeah, however old you are. So
But
you just
59, you could say it. I just turned 59.
okay, happy birthday,
Thank
and
you.
my dad turned 58, so he doesn't like me talking about that though. Um, Well, if you could try your hand at any other career or job, what would you choose?
So, when I was 2 years old, I wanted to be a dog when I grew up. And that is actually not a joke. If you talk to my mom today,
Okay.
she would tell you that when I was two, I used to eat dinner under the table because I thought you could actually become a dog through training, the way you become a shortstop or a lawyer or whatever. But in school, I was never a big writing kid, or English. I was always more of a math guy, right? Math
Oh,
and science. So I assume that if it had not been for that seventh grade English project, I would probably be doing something in the science world, or maybe the tech world right now.
so in honor of November being the month of giving thanks, I'm asking everyone I interview, who are you most thankful for? Someone that's helped you along your journey.
Well, I mean, certainly in my book career, my mom has been the number one. No disrespect to my seventh grade English teacher, the track coach, but
Yeah.
I mean, she has been the person who has helped me the most over the years, and I guess it kind of makes sense when you think of, oh, he wrote his first book when he was 12. Like, who's going to help? Mom.
Yeah.
But even today, and my mom's in her 80s, and the first thing I do when I write something is I email it up to my mom in Canada, and when I have a problem, she's the first person I go to. When I have an idea, we kind of hash it out together. So she's really been the person that has kind of made this happen for me. Like, if you really think about it, it's pretty weird and unlikely that this random kind of English assignment that I got in the 70s, is still my life, right? Like, I'm still doing at 59 what I did when I was 12. And that's just really lucky. Like, that doesn't happen that much. So Thanksgiving is kind of a great time for me to reflect on that. I mean, certainly when The Fort came out, and there was all the big hoopla about, like, oh, book 100. Um, I started to think that if I could somehow go back to that seventh grade class and whisper in the ear of 12-year-old me, who's working on book one, right, that one
Yeah.
day there's going to be book 100, I think that would have been, really, really something.
Yeah, that's so sweet that you have such a great connection with your mom. I hope that one day I'll have that with my mom. I hope she's listening to this.
I'm
She's
sure it will. I'm sure it'll happen.
and it's I that would be I want what do you think that 12-year-old you would say like in response to you being like you're gonna write 100 books?
Probably something like, teacher, there's this weird old guy molesting me and talking about weird stuff. You know, honestly, like if I had a chance to go back to my 12-year-old self, the one thing that I would really change is I would try to tell myself to be less impatient because
Mhm.
like what I went through, like publishing a book as a kid and really launching a career as a young teenager. um that's really something pretty cool. Like a lot of great
Yeah,
things were happening for me, but when I think back to those times, what I mostly remember is being unimaginably impatient. Like everything took forever, and it did, right? Like
hmm
I wrote my first book when I was 12. When did I sign a contract? I was 13 by then. When did it come out? I was 14. I'd started high school. You know, which is not really that long for those things to happen
yeah,
in publishing, right? But for a kid, it felt like everything took absolutely forever, right? So
yeah,
if I could go back to talk to my 12-year-old self, I would be like, just chill out and enjoy it. Like something really, really cool is happening right now. Don't constantly be spending your time agonizing over why is this taking so long.
yeah. I think that any kid would need that from their future self because I've never met a single kid who's like, okay, 2 years isn't a very long time.
Yeah,
Like, because compared
exactly.
to your lifespan, like if you've lived 12 years, 2 years is a sixth of your entire life. It feels like forever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now it's time for the final question. The question I ask every single person I interview. If you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real, it could be your favorite author or it could be your favorite book character. Who would it be and why?
You know, um, I'm a huge fan of the original The Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Yeah.
Galaxy.
hmm
And I mean, I'm not going to necessarily say, "Oh, I'd love to meet, Zaphod
Yeah.
Beeblebrox one day," but just to be sort of a fly on the wall. I've heard all kinds of different things. I'm not sure I have the story straight. Like it might have started as like a series of radio plays on the BBC and then become a book. But I would just love to meet like Douglas Adams and talk about the experience of, first of all, how you make a 5 or 6 book trilogy to begin with,
Yeah.
but also you know it's so funny, and there are so many kind of classic stand the test of time kind of moments in it. uh so often you sort of think, oh, I wish I had my towel, and things directly from it, that it kind of becomes a part of your life. It
Yeah.
becomes part of the lens in which you view the world. And that's the kind of thing I would hope that my own books would kind of contribute to people, that they would look at their lives as they grow up through things that they picked up from Slacker or Restart or Masterminds, or even one of the older books. A lot of the readers of my first books are like reasonably old now, because they came out so long ago. So I got to go with something connected to Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide.
Gordon Korman is truly a mastermind when it comes to middle grade books. Thank you so much for joining me today, Gordon. It's
All
been a
right,
dream
thanks
come
for
true.
having me. This has been fun.
It has, and I cannot wait to read the Super Teacher Project, book 101. I'm now going to know which book number all of your books are now because the 4 was 100. Now just keep counting up. And yeah, I hope you have a great day, and everybody listening, you have to read Gordon Korman's books. Like, I cannot tell you enough. They're middle grade legendary. Stay safe, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one, everybody. Bye.